Hi, I'm Michelle, and I'm with Marion Audubon, and we're happy that you guys have joined us tonight. Um, I recently attended the Hope for the Ocklawaha speaker series, which showcased talks by local experts. And Margaret Spontak was one of the speakers there, and I asked her to speak to our group. Margaret is an author and the chairperson of the Free the Ocklawaha Coalition for Everyone. Margaret, thank you for being with us tonight.
I appreciate this opportunity and just appreciate the Audubon chapter's support all over the state. We've gotten quite a bit of opportunity to get in front of them. So very excited. Let me just share screen right here. Everybody see that okay? I guess they're muted, so y'all tell me if I'm not. Anyway, I'm going to focus primarily on the wildlife aspect of Silver and Ocklawaha rivers and what Ocklawaha restoration could mean to the wildlife of the Silver and Ocklawaha River. There's so many different aspects, but Barbara thought that this would be the one that, Michelle thought this would be the one that would be of most interest, of course. So before we do that, though, I want to make sure everybody understands, and it's exciting to have Carolyn here from Duval Audubon, because this is one thing we've done really a lot of work on, is trying to help people understand that this is a huge system. It starts at Lake Apopka. The headwaters goes through the Ocklawaha Harris chain of lakes, which is the Ocklawaha River, goes into the area where you're going to be with Bubba Scales. That sounds like a great tour, by the way. Those are lands that my brother John were involved in helping buy when he was at the Water Management District. So it goes through the upper Ocklawaha, through Ocklawaha Farms and all that, and then meets the Silver River, Silver Springs, into the middle Ocklawaha River, where Eureka is kind of the dividing point where you see the Rodman Reservoir, the enlarged river, occur, all the way to the river where the dam blocks the natural flow, which would then go down to the lower Ocklawaha down this way. Some of you may have paddled that, and to the confluence of the St. Johns River at Willaca, and then all the way out to Jacksonville. The reason I mention this, it's really that connection, the severed connection, is really important to the aquatic wildlife. We'll talk about manatees quite a bit and fish. But that whole connection also is very important to terrestrial wildlife, which I know y'all, it's very near to your heart. Ed Lowe, and this video is on our free, Great Florida Riverway.com site, under the documentary. If you don't want to watch the whole documentary, below there's different small segments. And Ed Lowe, who was director of environmental scientists way back when I was there, he was actually there over 30 years. He actually reiterated that this is a restoration project of national and international significance in his mind, and really stresses a word that I've not really known much about till talking to Ed, not only our beloved Silver Springs, but the Ocklawaha, the St. Johns, and what he calls the Atlantic Bight, which begins somewhere up in South Carolina and goes down. It's one of the most diverse coastal and reef systems, where a lot of the fish and the bait for the saltwater fish like eels would go up and down this up to the Silver River back before the dam was put in place. So he really is committed that this is a very, very significant system of significance to not just our area. So this kind of shows more of a close-up of that area. And it took me a while. You get very turned around, because when you go up the Ocklawaha, some of you probably been up on during drawdown, which somewhat mimics restoration. The Ocklawaha actually dips to the south, So when you're looking at the dam, it takes some thinking about, okay, what am I looking at? Where's the lock system? Where's the natural river? So if you're coming off of 19 on the road into there, if you look this way, you're looking down what's the natural river. If you're looking up, the wider area is the Rodman Reservoir, which is really an engorged Ocklawaha River. So I hope that gives people some perspective. The Buckman Lock, and I'll talk more about this, it really does not attract many fish because it's, if you think of the raised wayside park, and that canal there is not very plentiful with fish because they're not really attracted to stagnant water. So there's very little fish traffic that comes through here, contrary to some people's thoughts. Manatees, I'm going to talk about that. They are making their way through there. A lot of you've seen them up in the Silver River, but we could have many more manatees if it was restored. So I think most of you, I don't have to go into details on what about the dam. Some people are surprised when they find out it doesn't provide water supply or flood protection or power generation. In fact, restoring it would provide natural flood protection, and really there are about 537 properties downstream of Willaca that could get flooded and are at risk, even loss of life, if this dam were to fail. So one thing I do always love to brag on is our science committee, and we keep on adding people, but we have a very strong science committee. Casey is kind of the lead of the co-chairs, but we have three different chairs, and everything we put out, including Michelle, the pictures, captions that were in the exhibit at the Hope House that y'all saw, everything like that is reviewed by our science team when we get a lot of questions over and over again about something important. We always lean to our science team to help answer that. So I'm very excited how we operate with this group. There also, after I talk, if there's lots of great fact sheets. When you go to freetheocklawaha.com, you'll see icons on manatees and Florida Wildlife Corridor, economics. There's fact sheets on all of those in there, and lots of great information. So being from Marion County, one thing that's really important to us, and I think most of you know, I was born and raised in Marion County, and I've worked in other areas and lived in other areas briefly, but I always come back to this area, which I love. So Bob Knight will tell you, and you've probably heard this, that Silver Springs will never be fully restored without breaching the Rodman Dam and restoring that, as Casey calls it, the biological flow. Another scientist calls it the energy. We like to think focal species and talk focal species like the striped bass and the white and channel catfish and the manatees, but there's a lot of other interesting creatures like eels and the big claw shrimp and all of those things that we hope will come back as well. So we have seen, it's kind of been interesting. Doug Munch from the Water Management District, back when I worked there, did a fish study, and there's several people that have done significant fish work, and Bob Knight and his crew go out there and do visual counts, I think every year, if I'm not mistaken. But what we've seen is right after the dam was put in, our fish population biomass, that's like if you put every fish in there in a big scale and you weighed it, that's biomass. And back then at one point it had dropped 90%. Now it's gone up, the weight has gone back quite close to where it used to be, but that weight is heavily tilapia, and we've got some of our catfish in there and a lot of our native species. Many of them are no longer there, they're in very low numbers. So that's something that I knew about the armored catfish. I didn't realize too much about the tilapia and how much they had really taken over the springs. So this is, you've probably seen John Moran's beautiful book that features then and now of the springs. And this is just the quote from Bob Knight about why this is important. Particularly, he's talking up to for the fish populations and the overall Silver Springs ecosystem. So I think most of you also know there's 20 springs. Some are very small, but there are 3 or 4 that FWC says could hold up to 100 manatees in the winter. And some of you have seen this one on the right is beautiful Cannon Springs during the drawdown. You can actually go swimming out there. So breaching the dam would uncover these springs, which are great for the ecology, for birds and fish and other aquatic wildlife. And we like to say this is really the largest springs restoration project available right now in the state, because not only would it help recover the 30 springs of Silver Springs, that would help bring back these 20 springs that are inundated. And when you go out there, by the way, drawdown is this fall, so you've got to make sure that you do a tour if you haven't already planned that. There'll be plenty of opportunities for boat rides, as well as Lars Anderson usually does hiking tours and kayak tours. But the wildlife, the river just really comes to life during drawdown. I mentioned those 4 ecosystems. Some of the more prominent fish that will come back is the native striped bass, which are 2 times bigger than regular bass. The American shad, which is it's different from the gizzard shad, or what my brother calls a stink shad, are big catfish. And mullet are very important, because you see some mullet in there now, but you don't see the big schools. They're like little vacuum cleaners. I was looking back in the book that Eternal Spring, that's really a classic book that was used for Silver Springs education back before I even worked there. And Russ Allen talked about their ability to graze on the algae, the noxious algae that we see all coating our eelgrass. So I know y'all are interested in manatees, and I think everyone knows how bad the situation has been over the last year. And that one of the challenges, and I wasn't totally aware of all this until I was working at Master of the Possibilities, and we brought in Bob, he's from UF, that's the expert on manatees. So right now, so many of them are using the power plants for their warm water refuge, because if temperatures get, I believe it's below 66 to 63, somewhere in there, manatees can die. So those, a lot of the natural areas have been cut off or gone. So they depend a lot on those outfalls. And that's why and those outfalls are beginning to shift as the power companies switch to different kinds of power. So springs throughout the state, not just our springs, are really important to the long-term survival of the manatees. I mentioned the 20 springs would be definitely provide. I call it a chain of springs, because if you think about it, they can go up and down. Found a Calistar Banner article, and I wish I could tell you the year, but it was front page headline that one manatee was coming into Silver Springs, and all the story I heard is all the shopkeepers and everybody would go out there. So we're very fortunate now that we're starting to see. Sometimes Scott Mitchell says on their Silver River Museum boats, they might see 12 in a day. You're definitely seeing more coming. Some of them that are resident manatees that are actually staying around all year round. So this is right out of the Florida Wildlife Commission the Warm Water Action Report that this is one of the sites that could provide essential warm water habitat for hundreds of manatees. And hundreds, I mean, we've heard different numbers, 500. They would be, different scientists predict different numbers, but definitely the numbers would increase. They have slowly increased over the last 3 years because of their huge need for food and loss of natural habitats. They are braving the Buckman more than they want to. So many of them the Buckman Lock is not open that many hours of the day, and lots of days, several days of the week, they're not there at all. So, but even when they're there opening the gates, a lot of manatees just take a look at that and turn around. And then we've had, it's 3 manatees killed in the lock since August. So it's just not a great situation for manatees. So the other thing I just wanted you all to be aware of, and just because Carolyn's on the phone, and I think it's important not to mention, the St. John's does go through Marion County. Lake George is a big part of that. And this restoration, those springs that are flooded right now, will provide 100 million gallons a day of fresh water to the St. John's River and the estuary there, which will be good for both terrestrial and aquatic wildlife. Y'all, last year, a study was done from Lake George to Green Cove Springs in Clay County, and at that point 90% of the eelgrass had disappeared. You know how important that is for food for manatees and nursery grounds for fish. So this would not only help our ecosystem up this way, it would be huge to the lower St. John's. And 150 million gallons a day is what the city of Jacksonville, approximately what the city of Jacksonville uses. That's a lot of water daily. So when we're talking about wildlife, it's important to know that this is part of the wildlife corridor. And a lot of the focus on this wildlife corridor, which this base map was originally established by Tom Hochter, who I've worked with very closely out of UF, and based on the biodiversity of the state and the most essential and critical wildlife habitat. And there's been 2 iterations of the wildlife corridor map, and y'all heard a lot about this. And gray is the existing lands that are conserved right now, and then the other colors are just this I'm going to talk about in a second. There's a lot of discussion about the 020 corridor from the Ocala National Forest to the Osceola National Forest, which is a really important corridor that this project could help bring back some of our focal species, and some of the things that don't get talked about are important lands like scrublands. So these are there are some vertebrates that were recorded out there at one time or the other. These are some examples. We are very excited during drawdown. We actually saw our first roseate spoonbill there last drawdown, but we also see during drawdown the wood storks come in, some snail kites, the white pelicans. You see a lot of wading birds for sure that are coming in. But it's definitely it's a good wildlife area now, but would be great if it was restored again. So this shows the 020 corridor and kind of where the basin is located. The good thing about this, most of the land is purchased. There's certainly land that could enhance it, but it's restoration of the river that would really restore a huge area. And that area includes 7,500 acres of forested wetland habitat. If you've ever heard of development, what it cost developers to for an acre of wetland habitat, 7,500 acres restored in one project is huge. And so some of the focal species that we talk about that will benefit from that are, of course, the panther and black bear, but there would be a lot of avian species as well. I've been told by the hunters that the Osceola turkeys are quite in demand, and I honestly did not really know that there were more than one species in Florida, and I've done a lot of reading on the Osceola turkeys, and they are so beautiful. So that's just an interesting side note. So why would this help wildlife? Well, I showed you in an earlier map where the canal comes through, and you know about the Rodman Pool. And I don't have the picture on here, but what will happen during restoration, this part of the Buckman Lock would be filled in. If you know Caraville Ranch area, I don't know if you've ever done any trips up there. Palatka's over here. But Caraville Ranch, there's some naval lands and Roadheaver Ranch in here. It would greatly help the traversing. The bear and panthers don't really like those high banks to cross, although they probably do at times. But it would really help the north-south movement. It will also, I don't have a picture, I don't think, in this slideshow of Deep Creek. This was one of the most pristine areas. I just saw Florida Native Plant Society did a bio blitz up here. There's a big section of this that is going to be purchased, we hope, in February at the cabinet meeting. But this has one of two, what I've been told is one of only 2 stands of white cedar in the state of Florida. And when the Ocklawaha is restored, this will be restored as well as a sluice system up here. So there's a lot of, you think of Orange Creek and all the little tributaries of my brother-in-law, and I think Sandra does some kayaking too. There's a lot of tributaries down along the Ocklawaha. So it's not just the rivers, the 3 rivers and 50 springs, but there's a lot of creeks and tributary systems. So Tom Hochter will tell you that bears and panthers typically won't cross this big a water body. You do see point data of them around this area. And you do see some of our bear. They know there's different species that kind of are more prevalent up in Osceola and those down in Ocala. And so you can see which ones have been moving, and some of them have moved, but by reducing that pool to a natural river, there will be a huge increase in wildlife flow back and forth, and improving these will actually, Alachua is very busy working on east-west corridor, and it actually will strengthen that east-west corridor as well. So this shows where the natural river would come into play, and the Buckman Lock would be made not operable, and there would be a canal here, kind of like the raised wayside. It would remain there because it's too costly to pull everything out. But there's lots of plans we have put together, people have talked about, to repurpose that area for recreation, different things. So this is Tom's out of his letter to us, that he feels like restoring the Ocklawaha would have a significant habitat connectivity benefit for wide-ranging landscape-dependent focal species, including the panther and the black bear. In the environmental impact statement that was done, it reinforces that overall, the bird species, avian species specifically, they call out and talk about some of those will greatly benefit from this. When you see the landscape change so much from, an open lake environment to wetland environment, forested wetland, you will see shifts in species, but the overall gain will, according to the EIS, will be significant. And like I said, will not only regain some of a lot of that wetland landscape, upwards up this way, we'll get some scrub and some other very important xeric habitat that will open up. So that's I'm be welcome to ask questions. I did want to, before I forget, I did want to mention that on February 4th, we will be having an event in the afternoon and evening out at the Ocklawaha Boat Club and the at Ray's Wayside Park. And the afternoon from 2 to 6 will be free and open to the public. We'll have boat rides. The boat rides there'll be an inexpensive charge for pontoon boat rides with Karen and Erica. And we're encouraging some people to kayak down there that day, but we'll also have bands going on and children's activities. And then that night from 6 to 8, we will that will be a pay for dinner, and we'll have a lineup of speakers and music from 6 to 8. So I'll encourage y'all to put that on your calendars. And
February 4th.
February 4th. So any questions? I saw a couple of chats. Somebody was asking the status of the Forest Service lawsuit. That did Florida Defenders of the Environment did that, not the coalition, but it did not move forward, and it was not on the basis of the ecological reasons. It was based on kind of that the judge didn't feel like there was a legal basis to force the Forest Service to take action against the state, that the Forest Service could pick which priorities they do that sort of thing with. So it in fact, if you were to read the case, it talks favorably about some of the economic benefits, but it was more a process thing. Ron, I hope I answered your question. If not, send me another chat here. In terms of drawdown, the drawdown was established quite a few years ago to happen every 3 to 4 3 to 4 years, because if you think of an aquarium, I kind of think of it as an aquarium. If you don't maintain it, if you don't like drain the water and refill it, you have fish kills, you'll have problems with your health of your aquarium. So the reservoir actually builds up, both water quality issues, but a lot of, even every year there's blockages because of weed stuff, and they have to heavily spray that area and on up into the Ocklawaha. And they're using some really heavy duty pesticides. So that 3 to 4 years is to kind of flush that out and flush the reservoir out so that you don't have as much weed growth and water quality issues. And unfortunately, that actually, the lead water scientist from the Water Management District, who just recently retired, who studied that for years, I think 30 years, says every drawdown actually harms the lower St. John's. So even though it helps with weed management, that is actually damaging the downstream system. But when the drawdown occurs, where they bring it down to where it is now, it's usually kept around 18 to 20, somewhere around there, maybe 21 feet high, the water. They bring it down to they step it down over from like October. You'll see it start to draw down October to March, maybe into the first week in April. It brings it down to, I believe it's 9 feet. And it's somewhat, you don't have the fish flow and the manatee flow, but it's hard to describe, but the banks come to life. The banks are covered up normally with that enlarged river. And so you see more gators, you see more birds. I saw so many flocks of turkeys, and the recreation was up 81%, the usage during drawdown. And so what our economist says that shows there's really a pent up, wildlife viewing is one of the biggest attractors in Florida. And so our economist shows that there is a real demand for diverse recreation on that river, not just bass fishing. I'm sorry, forgot to have water here. It's our goal that they don't ever fill the river back up after this drawdown. That is our ultimate goal. Caroline has some really good questions. There was a Jacksonville pollster that's done a lot of Republican polls, international and national state, that did a poll last spring, and it showed that active voters in Marion and Putnam counties, 77% supported restoration, and very a small percentage were pro dam, and there were some in the middle. I wish I could tell you exactly, but it's probably 10, maybe 9% that were pro dam, and then there were some undecideds. We were very surprised it was quite that high. We knew it was going to be the majority, but we'd call that a super majority. And the pollster was decided to go back and do a Putnam only poll so he could get the margin of error down, if anybody knows anything about polls. And in Putnam, just Putnam alone, it was 74% in favor of restoration. So the public opinion has really swayed. The St. Johns River Water Management District survey, which was this poll was a scientific survey, that was a non-scientific poll. That highly, I want to say 80% or something. It was super high. So the public opinion's there. And so where we are is our target is really the legislators and the Republican leadership for sure, and the governor. And we're having very good discussions with them, with the legislators more than the governor. And not that the governor has come out in opposition of it. He's just been focused on different areas. He just announced a big executive order today that I haven't had a chance to study, but a lot of money for resiliency and things that could be used for this. But he did not call it out. So we are cautiously optimistic on this year. And our meeting, this is like a full-time job for me, and many people are working on this all the time. We now have 3 lobbyists in Tallahassee that are working for different organizations focused just on this. And the most important thing, it's hard sometimes to explain to people, it's just getting people to call their legislators, write their legislators. Don't say you're with, just say you're a constituent, or if you're a business person, tell them you're a business person. We need to show diverse support for it. So we've done a lot of work recently in Marion County talking to business leaders, trying to get more anglers. We've got a lot of angler support. A lot of the fishers in particularly the lower St. Johns are realizing it's been harmful to the lower St. Johns. And when we do our tabling events, and Barbara has helped us with that, we've had very few, even at the outdoor show at World Equestrian Center the last 2 years, we had very few people come up and say they were against restoration. And if we did, there was just a very good discussion about it. We've really tamped it's very important to keep the rhetoric down right now. Just keep the education flowing and let leaders know, like Stan McLean, Keith Perry, and Bobby Payne now has part of Marion County. Bobby Payne is super important. So it's key for everybody to reach out, make a phone call, just say, let them know that you support restoration. I hope that you'll see something happen this session. Write them a letter, email them, whatever's most comfortable for you. And if you know business people in town, people that might have donated to one of their campaigns, just try to get your friends and neighbors to do the same. I would say that is the most important thing that needs to happen. Let me see how long it would take. That's a really good question too. So the environmental impact statement, which is about this thick, and then there's an appendix like that thick, lays out the timeline, and it lays out about a 3.5-year timeline. If you've worked with Water Management District Corps, that there's, that's what the dream schedule would be. And I'm sure that it'll take a while to get everything going. But actually the first year is pretty much drawdown and getting the barriers up, just like you would do a construction project, making sure you've got control of invasive plants that would pop up during restoration. So I think it's the second or third, it's not until the second or third year that it gradually drops it down. So the people and the plants and everything can adapt. And if for those of you who've been to Drawdown, if you get to walk with Karen and them out amongst, you see these gorgeous cypress trees, because you can now walk on the land where they are. You'll see cypress trees within those few months grow this big, just hundreds of them, and then they all get covered up. So there's, even after all these years, there's still native plant seed in the forest there that will regenerate. So it's not a long time. There's some that advocate for stretching it out. I'm not necessarily one of those. I think, if you got a big project going on, it's disruptive in some ways, just, things, you got trucks and all that coming in. I feel like it should be kept to schedule, and I think they have a really good plan laid out. I think I answered. If anybody I didn't answer, please let me see. Has the project been approved now? So this is really interesting. The project permit is in abeyance right now. It's been that way for years. In other words, there's a full plan, there's a full permit, which has been studied to death. And so it wouldn't take in our scientific team, because we started thinking, well, some things have changed with the manatees, and there's not much, but the manatees, and there was one other thing. The original plan didn't talk about the estuary too much. And so, but I think our whole science team, plus some people not on the formal science team, have reviewed the partial restoration plan. They still feel it. And these are people from Water Management District, from USGS. We've got people from UF. These people all have, are very credentialed and know some of the top scientists from the Water Management District. Now that they're retired, they can get involved with this. So they feel like the plan is still solid. And but that permit is all written up, ready to go. So it's not like it would take a lot of time to actually start things going. Any other good questions? Those are all some of the top questions. I always get the question, why isn't it happening? And it really boils down to, we think a few people are kind of holding things up right now. And so legislators really do need to hear from us. And I love the Everglades, and I love the South Florida project, but there's a lot of people, a lot of support for the Everglades statewide. We've got to show people that this Northeast Florida project is super important. We say it touches in some ways 12 counties, directly or indirectly. But in terms of, you think about the flyway and when I was at Audubon, we were really into talking about the flyway. Think about the avian benefits. I call it the Everglades of the North to us, but I think it would have significant benefits. And Chris Farrell has spoken on that quite a bit. Michelle, Michelle was frozen, looked frozen. I want to make sure. All right, I probably
Well,
talked too
thank
long.
you, Margaret. Yeah, fantastic information. And I love all the questions that everyone had. And I do also have the postcards that the Free the Ocklawaha Coalition has put together. They are already addressed to Governor DeSantis. And so you can just add your comments, whatever you want to say, and mail these in. So I will have these at our walk on January 27th. And as long as I have some left over, I'll have them at the following walks as well. So pick one of those up.
And since Carolyn's on the phone, Carolyn, we do have an event. I think it's at JU that the River Keepers put together. I just talked to Chris Phil today about it. Our plan is to have events up and down the river on the 4th. So we'll have something in Jacksonville as well. And we will be giving out advocacy kits like yard sign, talking points, and that at those events as well.
Okay, sounds good.
Michelle, I have a whole lot of the postcards too, so we can go. I do.
Well,
Okay.
I do.
Not, but we
I
can put
do.
it together.
I do want to thank Barbara and Michelle. Michelle's family came out and were mural guides. Now I just love that whole day. It was a lot of fun. And Barbara, thank you and your husband and everybody for having that material at your booths at so many different events.
All right, you're welcome.
You are welcome. Our pleasure.
All right. Well, thank you, everybody, and good night.
Good night. Thank you for having me.
Thanks, Margaret. It was great. Thank you.
You're welcome.